Welcome 1, 2, 3, however many people watch this video. It's Cosmonarchy. It's a time for another cast, and we're going to be looking at Aoud 64 versus Krankendau. As far as I understand right about now, this is a situation where Aoud is going to be playing Protoss? Well, let's find out. I'm actually going to be going in reverse order here because I believe P here is like the first one, and then P5 is the fifth one, and they were sent to me in a sequence where only the good ones were sent, basically, by Krankendau himself. Shout out to the homie. Let's see what happens. Aoud is in the bottom left of Paradise, indeed, as Protoss. Oh, should we do the color guessing? I feel like the color guessing is fun. We'll look at both of the players. Krankendau on the bottom right here. Horizontal spawns along the bottom of this 4-spawn map. A port of Dante's Peak to Cosmonarchy. Paradise, of course, by none other than Biddy. Everybody complaining. PVZ, so I wanted to see... I wanted to see what all the hubbub was about, apparently. All right, let's talk a little bit about these colors, though. I'm going to say this is saffron. No, it was lemon. Those are two tricky ones, man. Neblime strikes again. This one looks like dark olive? Yeah, all right, I got one of them. I'm expecting Krankendau to go for his patented Larvosk first opener. This is something that he himself has developed for the game. So if you guys are new to Cosmonarchy, honestly, Krankendau is a really good player to talk about because I feel like he's just a guy to watch, you know, like he's going to be approachable to some degree. You know, we don't have anybody who's like Flash level player yet. So being able to look at Krankendau, don't get intimidated by his 600 plus APM in the top right next to the minerals as the APM display. Don't get intimidated by that. He's just keeping his hands warm. And but pay attention to his build orders. Pay attention to his strategy. I feel like the way he approaches things, you notice he'll pull the workers off of gas after he gets enough for the Larvosk. This is the way to play Zerg now. Like Krankendau has essentially pioneered that. And, you know, we got people like Arda Turtle, a stalwart of the North American scene, who has done a lot of work playing a little bit here and there in some of the tournaments and whatnot. And AOT has absolutely done stuff like go for the more old style where you put a Hatcherosk at the ramp and you just kind of poke out that way. Krankendau comes in and shows him what for. And the very next game, AOT decides to go pool into Larvosk. So he does the opposite, whereas this is Larvosk into pool. And that gave him a lot of military edge over in the ZVZ matchup in particular. You can imagine that's very impactful. So anyway, just thought I would mention that stuff. We do have the double Droleth Scout here because Krankendau has not found his opponent in the first spawn. And I think Aoud went for a cross spawn first for the scout, if I'm not mistaken. So this worker has slipped the net. The Drakiden has not actually zoned it away. And in fact, Krankendau, I don't think he's seen the embassy, but he's absolutely going to be putting down the worker scout there. You get burrow for free. You get all the researches rolled into the unit costs, so you don't have to upgrade anything in Cosmonarchy. They're just integrated into the unit designs themselves. And instead of having upgrades, we've got 50 units per race, and you just have this really big expansive tech tree you can scale through. So as a result, you get to burrow. However, the compounding factor is if you suspect somebody is burrowed somewhere, or say it's a Lakizalisk, formerly the Lurker, and that burrows and it's attacking you and stuff, that's definitely a situation where you'd want to say, oh, okay, let's see what we can do about that by, you know, falling back and just stepping on top of the unit. And stepping on top of a burrowed unit will reveal it. So that's a neat little trick that you can deploy at your own leisure. But the embassy, very fast here for Aoud, is a situation where he wants to just make a lot of workers. This is his version of the quarry. He's a Terran player by trade, so seeing him play Protoss here is going to be very interesting. The second gate, he's got the Drakiden in the back. The Droleth is going to go ahead and unburrow and get out of dodge, because now the scout has been rectified, and I like doing it right in front of your opponent, because it's kind of like, haha, I was doing this the whole time. But the Hierophant out means that this attack has to be, you know, there's not really an attack. There wasn't really a chance that he tickles him to death or anything anyway, but the Hierophant applies a slow on-hit debuff where it reduces your movement speed as long as you're in range of the Hierophant. And the other thing that it does is if you stack it up 5 times, which I don't think it could even do to a Zethra Core because they die too fast. But if you do stack it up 5 times and then the unit dies, they give an attack speed bonus to all of the Protoss's allies, all of the allied units in an area. So you got to watch out for that, especially. Not to mention that 5 stacks of the passive will start to slow the attack speed as well. Whereas the movement speed, it doesn't stack up, but you can still apply additional hits. And if you hit them 5 times with 5 Hierophant attacks on 1 unit, it will give you the attack speed buff, and obviously also proc that attack speed increase for yourself, right? So it's a unit that has a lot of utility, and it's all based on its on-hit behavior. Another thing to point out here is that normally the Hierophant's weakness is the fact that it only has 5 range. You look at the 6 range of the Dracodon by comparison, the 4 range of the Ecclesiast, which is a utility unit that will restore shields around all Protoss units around the victim. So if they attack this Zethar Core and this Zealot has missing shields, it'll get some shields back. It's sort of like an attack that is a shield battery in a way. It just, emits shields for everybody to pick up. The way that this works now on the cliff, though, is that ranged attacks get +2 range targeting down. So the Hierophant turns into a 7 range unit, which is like some of the highest range that you can get out of tier 1. So, I think natively, for example, the Terran Goliath, which is sort of like this powerhouse unit, has it just has a native range, right, of 7. So to match that with a unit like the Hierophant, with having that attack speed slow, the movement speed slow, etc., that's a pretty powerful utility. So you can't realistically break the cliff position. Aoud is just going to go ahead and drop the Nexus, keeping up nicely with workers at this stage in the game without having any expansion yet, which is pretty remarkable. Definitely a benefit of having the very fast embassy. Oh, he's attacked his own Witness by accident. Thankfully, he didn't do it with everything he had, or it just would have been killed. Witness is mostly just used here to pick off any, errant burrowed units. You can lay burrow traps, like if there were a bunch of Zeths here, and then the units, walk in, and then the unburrow happens, and they surround. That obviously can't happen with the Witness here. The other thing that's really cool about the Witness this early on is that you notice Krankendau has gone for this Shroud. The Shroud gives you access to a couple of Zerg units, including the former Lurker, the Lekizalisk. That means that as a result of having the Witness out so fast, which normally doesn't happen this fast, it's normally a little bit around more 8 minutes or something like that. Krankendau, who's gone for a fast, Zorkaz, he's going to give himself the ability to, use those Lekizalisks, use the splash damage against the Gateway Army. It's very, very good for that, but he's not going to have it with impunity. So he's had to rely on building a lot of circuits here. This is a lot of anti-surface defense. We're talking about 6 workers expended on that. And so that explains a little bit why Krankendau wasn't further ahead in the economy standpoint. Love the Legionnaire just sitting here, guarding for a potential 3rd base taken at the 3 o'clock location. More likely, you'll see this base be taken. But it's good to know that your opponent is expanding closer to you, keeping most of their bases towards you and where you are. That's something that, obviously, if you follow StarCraft 1 a lot, Zerg players tend to try to expand away from their opponent. If it's Terran, they're going to expand in another main most of the time and use Niduses to connect it. Niduses do exist in StarCraft 1 as well as in Cosmonarchy, but in Cosmonarchy you need to pay a little bit more to get to Tier 2, which is where the Nidus is unlocked. So it's a little bit different. But you can see Krankendau setting up to take his hatch there. I don't know if people know this, but the way that I have my config set up, I can hold Alt to see the order lines. So that ends up helping me track things like that. But otherwise, it would be very distracting if this was all on the screen the whole time, right? That would be really awkward. So I have it set up to have that for Alt, but you can edit your config and set that up yourself. Pretty easy. As of right now, it looks like Aoud is happy to macro up. He has gone for the Ardent Authority. This is going to afford him to do Acantor drops. That looks like a Reaver, but it's called an Acantor now. Works very differently. We'll talk about that when it unloads. Looks like the Ovaleth over here doesn't actually have any cargo in it, so there's nothing going to be dropped, but it tries to get a scout off. The Lekizalisks here are going to chew through the front line very nicely, and a couple more can still be burrowed. The Witness, remember, is detecting. We're going to need to see that Acantor get onto the front line nice and fast, using the cliff advantage to fire off a couple of shots. You'll notice how slow the Acantor projectile travels now, but it doesn't have any pathing issues, and it will go right through other units. So that's a pretty big deal. You can see here now there's not really that much steam left in. Krankendau is going to have to sail away with the Lekizalisks, unless he can stick around and kill the Acantor. It doesn't look like the answer is yes. He's trying for it, but it's not advisable, I would say. So there it goes. Those 2 Lekizalisks are going to just sort of scale on back. We got a Zeth burrowing over there. You can't block building placement with burrow, but you can absolutely do some, shenanigans where you unburrow and then attack the worker when it's happening or whatever. So these Lekizalisks are going to get chewed through. I would love to see this back one be repositioned. But right now you can see the anti-drop setup is already happening. We've got a Zoristaleth here to try to tank aggro. Very tanky unit, can take I think 3 or 4 Acantor hits before it dies. The Acantor has shown itself yet again. I love the Lekizalisks in a couple of spots. The only concern I have is that they are indeed sort of mostly near the resource line. We're probably going to see a couple of workers die here, but it's Zerg. And as Zerg, you can kind of afford to do that. And you can see the Lekizalisks were not scouted, were not anticipated. So that is a little bit awkward there. It has taken a little bit of damage there from the Akantor on the high ground. This is very good usage of that high ground. You love the Spraiths as well. Nice positioning from Krankendau, kind of denies extended play from that. And so, yeah, that Lakizalisk very narrowly avoiding death. That's another concern of why you would might not want to put it in the mineral line, but it has really good range there, right? So that's something that you can absolutely say. Ideally, I guess you'd want to put it behind the minerals. You can't really do that thanks to this tree doodad, so maybe something that Biddy B will consider. Hydroth then now being added. We've got a good gas bank right now for Krankendau. He's about halfway to where he needs to be in order to tech up to tier 2. Meanwhile, there is no third base coming for Aoud. I wonder if he wants to do some kind of 2-base committed attack. I don't want to say all in, but a committed attack. He's going to go ahead and put down a Grand Library, which is 300 minerals. It's almost the cost of a Nexus, keeping that in mind. And he's going to be able to get basically advanced tier 2 disciple units, which is what we kind of collectively refer to all of the units out of the gateway as. He also has an analog, so it's an interesting choice there. I think his idea is that he wants to refract the Lakizalisk spines, because the analog has a passive ability where if it gets hit with an attack, it will fire back the attack at the attacker. And this will drain a flat amount of energy from the analog. So if it takes 50 damage or 5 damage, it will still just return the damage. It won't subtract the damage from the energy. It'll just subtract a flat amount. So usually you want to avoid this by attacking it with like a lot of Zethrakors or, you know, Quasalisks or some kind of low damage unit, right? As Terran, you might want to attack it with Mavericks, or even Madcaps would be okay, because you'd sprinkle the damage across all the attackers, you bleed the energy out very fast. I believe it's 10 energy per hit, but it's been a while since I've actually seen the unit, so we'll try to keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, 4th base being taken at 6 o'clock, it's kind of audacious for Krankendau to be expanding towards his opponent, especially after he's already shown the willingness to go for Akantor drops. In fact, I don't really know where that envoy is. I guess it's okay. It's just hovering down here. It still has the Akantor in it, which is, you know, it's those kinds of technical units. I know that Artosis will sometimes call that for Protoss. The tech units, the powerhouse units that Protoss has in order. Like, you can chew through the Zealots, to a lesser extent the Drakidans. They cost a little bit of S-beam, so you don't necessarily want to be sacrificing them. But you can, in theory, replace those very nicely if you have a lot of gateways. The Crucible is increasing the training speed of all of the structures that it's empowering. You can see it's out of range of this Grand Library, but this one will train faster. You kind of just see that in general. So absolutely a situation where it looks like, yeah, this worker is going to get bopped by that Legionnaire. Tier 2 has finished being made here for Krankendau. So I think he's bought enough time with his forward post on the spoke, which hasn't even necessarily been scouted here, as Aoud is just trying to make sure he can set up his third base nice and easy. I'm going to go ahead and order those workers back to mining. One of them gets away, but he'll take the long route. That's fine. He doesn't mind a scenic route. And he's just going to sort of stab up northbound. I wonder if he's, you know, what he's thinking in particular. Looks like that Legionnaire has migrated to another base rather than die, because it is the only unit on that side of the map, that hemisphere, if you will. And I'm not sure. I mean, at this stage, we're looking at the Architect, we're looking at the, okay, a couple of other units, the Atreus. The Atreus is kind of like, you can see it bears some resemblance to the Dracoden. We're actually working on a new model for that, funnily enough. But it moves a bit slower. It does deal splash damage, and it attacks faster too. So that is absolutely something that can be very helpful. You can see here, the Lakizalisk, I don't think they were on hold position. No, you just couldn't tell that they were there, because when you burrow, you have half vision range. So he actually didn't see the enemy army there. That would have been a nice meaty shot if he had attacked sooner. Now the Witness revealing it means that these Lakizalisks will be in danger. You can see the attacks are going live. The analogs have done a little bit of damage, and you can absolutely see that the Lakizalisks have already started to take a little bit of return damage themselves. Massing up with the Hydras and the Aziracors. Oh man, that's an analog that just got hit with a lot of Lakizalisk spines. Thankfully, it doesn't look like... Well, I say that, but a lot of the Hydras are actually quite low, so I feel like you got to be really careful about standing on top of your Lakizalisks when the analogs are in the area to refract. But that's a meaty shot as well. Two salvos of the Akantor hit, and it's going to be enough to get rid of 2 Lakizalisks. Those are expensive units. You don't necessarily want to be dealing with that. And the Witness spotting here means that there's really not much more that Krankendau can do with these Lakizalisks. He is going to go ahead and unburrow and abandon the spoke. But again, he was buying time. He has a 4th base up. He's setting up his 5th base at 3 o'clock. So he has a great economy, 120 workers, making a Mutat Spire so that he can try to snipe down some of these siege units, those technical units I was talking about. And now 6 o'clock is going to be threatened. It does have some anti-surface defense, a couple of Lakizalisks in the area. Not only one of them actually on the field, though, and that is going to be, I think, very, very easy to dispatch. You can see here the witness by proving that it's very, very potent as of right now. We have some Lyrilisks out, which have the bounce attack, but I don't know if it's going to be enough of them. Great Psy Storm as well to zone. If you step through this, you're just going to take a lot of damage. It lasts a long time, so you have to watch out for that and use it more as a zoning tool. And I do feel like just the position that Aoud has taken, where he's using high ground to attack most of the army that Krankendau was fielding. A lot of his workers have evacuated at the very least, so he isn't really that far down in workers, and he can immediately resaturate that base at 3 o'clock and essentially be at 4 bases still. But that's where Aoud is setting up behind this attack as well. He's setting up a 4th base at 9 o'clock. We have a lot of Lyrilisks mutating over here, but I just don't know if it's enough. That's a great hallucination. That is going to result in a horde of Cantor shots. When you attack a hallucinated unit, it spawns an extra strike, a phantom strike that deals half damage. But if you hit 5 targets with splash damage, it's going to spawn 5 projectiles, and that's exactly what you saw there. So an incredible amount of damage just went down to utterly flatten the Lyrilisks before they could even really get anywhere. Very, very exciting engagement there at the last second. And remember, Krankendau still has the economic advantage for now. He was able to get this hatch up as well, so it'll be some time before that Legionnaire can realistically threaten it. But right now, it looks like Aoud does want to go ahead and step on it, right? He's going to go ahead and put the pedal to the metal, gunning for that. He has a couple of units sort of... I would say that they're in a tough spot right now, but Krankendau still doesn't have his army prepared. He's just now mutating a bunch more of the Lyrilisks. I'm not sure it's going to be enough. I feel like he needs heavier hitters, right? He made the Mutat Spire, but he hasn't made any actual units from it. You need those Protathalors out for the long range, or maybe a horde of Mutas, because there's not really that much crowd control. It's just the Atriuses. Now the Lyrilisks are going to go ahead and do their best. You can see the movement speed buff activating here. Aoud isn't really interested in using it, and the front line is starting to... Well, there's not really a front line. There was just a bunch of Lyrilisks that just get absolutely shellacked, but I was going to say that maybe if there was a more sustained amount of force coming out of Krankendau, he might have been able to try to, you know, really just isolate the heavy heavy anti-ground crowd control from the Acantor. That could have been a good move from him. Unfortunately, though, Aoud is able to take the first game. I don't know if that was actually the first time they played Protoss or not, that he played Protoss versus Krankendau, but we do have a second game, and let's see how that one goes. Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen, cross spawns this time around. I'm sure Aoud will go for a Nexus first. He's the purple Protoss in the top left, with Krankendau being, once again, the dark olive Zerg. We'll confirm that I'm correct, because how could I not be? Of course, dark olive, purple, Krankendau, Aoud, Zerg, Protoss, and Biddy B. Oh, he's got him! That Biddy B tile will be there forever. Take a sip now. Remind you to think about your coffee and all of your coffee donations. Whoa, I just realized this whole time the coffee link has been wrong. What happened to it? Where's it going? Where's it gone? Oh, I know what happened. I think. Nope. No, I have no idea what happened. It's just gone. Well, you can support us at coffee.com/Pronago and Week7. I wonder how long that's been missing. At any event, we do have, of course, the gateway coming for Aoud. Looks like Krankendau going to be doing the same thing as last time. And here we are just dedicated to the grind, dedicated to bringing you better RTS content, better RTS games than you'll find pretty much anywhere else. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I've talked to anybody who's played this and Stormgate and says that this isn't better than Stormgate, so that should already tell you something. Although we have a couple Stormgate devs who watch us, so shout out to you guys. Hope you guys can turn the ship around. Feels a bit BM to say it that way, but gotta keep it real. Gotta keep it real. I'll say full transparency, I invited people like Monk and other Stormgate people on for a talk show, like a podcast interview style thing, where I told them up front, I was like, you know, I've been pretty critical of the design decisions and the corporate decisions, but I still think we could have an interesting conversation if you wanted to come on and argue for your ideas. There's a lot of skeptics out there, and not the hashtag skeptic kind, but there's a lot of skeptics out there who maybe would benefit from hearing from the horse's mouth, so to speak, what you all think. And they were like, well, I'll have to run it by marketing. And that's where I knew I would never, ever hear from them again. And true to form, that is exactly what happened. When you have to run interview requests by marketing, I think you might be a lifestyle company, just saying. All right, Embassy is about halfway done here for Aoud, and I believe it was put down without the Droleth scouting it. So that's already kind of an interesting little tidbit there, where does Krankendau expect the same sort of thing? He's going out with 8 Zethrakors. He wants to catch the Scribe, kill it with fire. In fact, factional Zethrakor idea? It's a lava-ling? Lava-rokor? I don't know. He's spending a lot of time trying to catch the Worker Scout, and he wants to hide that he's trying to take an Expo. So this actually might make Aoud think, oh, this is an all-in of some kind, and, he definitely avoids showing that. So that, that's actually not bad. That's not bad. That will work. That'll do the trick. We'll go ahead and preemptively put our camera locations assigned to those naturals. For those who want to know, I use F1, F2 for the players, biasing top left first, and then it's always left over right, top over bottom. And then F3 is the first player's natural, and F4 is the second player's natural. Because that's they're not going to be able to get too far in. And, eventually I would do like F5, F6, that sort of thing. These are the things that you can do when you're observing every single game all the time. I will also say it's actually quite nice sometimes to have people like Neblime step in for the cast, where I can just sort of... I mean, we're not always looking at the same thing. Like, if he's in there live spectating, he'll be looking at something else, which can sometimes actually lead to some confusion, where he's talking about something I haven't seen yet, and I just have to, take him at his word for it. But it is also nice to be able to, like, spectate all the real things while he's talking, and then I just, like, quickly click on stuff, and I know what I'm going to say, because I saw something happen over there. And then I try to bring that in, so that's pretty cool. It definitely helps. More and more Zethrakor are floating around here. When you burrow, you regenerate HP twice as fast, and you already regenerate HP much faster than in StarCraft 1 by default anyway. So that can actually help out quite nicely for when you're trying to do this sort of thing where you dive in and see the army size. And that seems to be what Aoud is trying to get to. We see a rogue gallery, a gateway, and a warden, interestingly enough, in the mineral line. So Aoud being a little bit conservative, but he is setting up his extra nexus. And this time around, Krankendau is pushing the economic advantage a little bit more, I think. That's kind of interesting, right? Nexus is going to go ahead and finish. Second gate now operational. And what Crank should have been able to take note of by jumping in here and seeing the army only grow by 1 or 2 units is that he's probably on 1 gate for a while, which means he's going economic. And so you see Crank is going to go ahead and put down... that was not supposed to be a pool. I think that was supposed to be... Okay, he's actually going for a Hydrothyn. Normally he puts his Larvosk here. So I thought maybe that's what he was gunning for, but he's actually going to go for a fast Hydroth. And I don't hate it. He's got a second Larvosk in the main this time around, hatched by the ramp to spread the Kagro some more. So he's going to be going up to 5 larva generation structures. So we'll just say like 5 larva production every single, 12 seconds? 10 seconds? I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, actually. It used to be a point of contention. We used to talk about it all the time, and from then it was in my head. But I think it's every 10 seconds. I could be wrong about that. No, I guess it might be 12 because the worker is 14 or whatever. Anyway, the point is that we have the Hydrothyn, we have the anti-surface defenses waiting to mutate. You save 150 minerals towards other things while you wait for the army to move out. And we have a fast Charlatan, as well as a Barghest. So the Barghest, when it attacks, thus decloaking itself, it will provide an extra armor penetration to all allies, and that does stack with the number of Barghests you have. So that can be most useful versus structures. Versus Zerg, it's not that useful, actually. I guess Zealots do get much more damage dealt to, like, Zor-Yusthaleth, because I don't think they have that much armor penetration off the top of the dome. Yeah, they only have 1, and they're 2 times 8. So they're actually dealing 2 times 6 to Azorius. So it's a reduction of, going from 16 to 12, right? So pretty big reduction. It looks like there was a cheeky Ovaleth drop here, where all he was able to really do with that is... he's going to end up losing the Ovaleth. That's a little bit painful, but he will at least see the... he's at least going to see that there's a Charlatan there, right? So that will help him out and allow him to itemize accordingly. Going for the Zork is interesting. And he kept a Quaz burrowed over here. He can kind of park it like at the extremity and attack a Scribe, like heckle the Scribes harvesting Vespene, I guess, but probably not going to be able to do too much. It might just, at the very least, it'll be a good scout. He'll see the Grand Library, he'll see the Crucible, if he just runs it through the base, so to speak. Third base already coming for Krankendau. I feel like he's keeping up with things, he's not falling too far behind. or anything in the early stages of the game, which is always good. You know, there's not really been like a decided advantage one way or the other. It's mass Hydra this time too, so some Lakids are going to come on in. I wouldn't mind seeing Gorgs with this army, actually. I know that might sound a little silly to some people. Wow, second embassy. I didn't even notice that. I feel like Gorgs, you kind of want them to just right-click on top of things like Charlatans and Ecclesiasts. It's just, if there's enough Hierophants, that will get a lot harder to do. So I guess taking another look at the composition, I was just thinking of the Charlatans mostly, but looking at the fact that there are Heralds hitting the field now, Heralds debuff enemies, and when the enemies are struck, it basically gives any of their attackers like shield steal in a way. So obviously they synergize nicely with Amaranths that already have shield steal, but they kind of give a little bit of a force multiplier of healing in a way to all Protoss units. So they can be quite underrated. Admittedly, they are like a short-range unit with moderate attack speed, so it's not like they're going to be able to debuff a bunch of units. They don't have crowd control or anything. But it's something where I feel like their niche has yet to be fully exploited. So we'll see if Aoud can maybe make a compelling argument here. I think versus Zerg, they're probably not that ideal, but, you know, as long as you have units like the Ecclesiast to try to keep them healthy, then I feel like anything is possible. So the gateways are here, the Rogue Gallery and the Grand Library continuing to occasionally produce units. And we just have a large army amassing for Crank. He's got plenty of Hydras. He's got some Kizilisks, setting up some defenses, fourth base on the way. He's already preemptively set up areas where he wants to do some anti-drop or whatever. So for his natural and eventually for his third base, he's got this Kager that'll undoubtedly end up being a Spraith. And there's tier 2 in the natural. Always a fun time when we see that. I'll never forget the Inozlix game where he put it was on Repulsion, this old space platform map. It was XY, so it was like bottom left, top right. And I'll just never forget when he put the tech in his third, and Heltrix Achmeded, Hurakan dropped him, and burned down the Iris. It was ridiculous. Forward post going down for Aoud. He didn't want to drop the Nexus just yet, I guess. Maybe didn't have the money at the time. Starting to build some Vagrants out. They're kind of like a shock trooper unit, in a way. And then when they take fatal damage, they turn into a unit, a Shade. And the Shade has more movement speed and attack speed, but will take fatal damage, like it'll take damage over time. So, eventually dying. So it's like sort of, it gives itself a timed life situation there. All right, with the Iris about to pop, there it is. Let's see what Krankendau wants to do. He's just now heard, assuming he's using the default voice pack for Zerg, because we've got different announcer packs you can use. He's just now heard Supreme Node Gestated, which I'm sure is very epic. And now he's going for the Mutath Spire. So the Spire is an option that you go to as Zerg when you want some kind of precision strike. You can use Sikralisks for crowd control in a pinch. You know, they're actually pretty good versus, like, I guess if you're dealing with, like, the Vassal Barguest spam that sometimes happens for Protoss in early stages of the game, and you happen to be able to get to tier 2, you can do the Sikralisk move. I think normally people are using, like, Skithracore, Nathskith, or whatever. Mostly just Skith, I imagine, versus that. Maybe some Bactyl or something. So, you know, that's that. But very, very interesting sort of back and forth. This game has been a lot quieter, actually. We haven't seen any drop attempts. Mostly, I think there's like a handshake where all of the players are content to just macro up. Both of them getting very high in the worker counts. We got lots of gateways. We got an Ancestral Archives coming. No gas capping happening for either player just yet. But if I had to guess, I would say that Krankendau will probably do that. He's upgraded his den into the Swamp. So the significance of that is basically that, while Krankendau tries to stay ahead up a base every single time, going for that 5th base saturation now as the Protoss army is threatening to move out but then falls back. Oh man, teasing us. Nexus about to finish for the 4th base for Aoud. But the Swamp is going to give Krankendau the ability to make Vithralisks, which is the Devourer. It still has a similar sort of role, except when it hits air units that are over ground units, it spreads its debuffs to the ground units as well. So that can be very significant. As you can see here, the Uptecton, which has the ability to, kind of like a Colossus, like move over units that are smaller in stature. So this very meaty bad boy is up and running, bearing a strong resemblance to the Atreus, of course. Saturation coming up online here. And there's the 5th base coming for Aoud. So he's doing pretty well to keep in league with Crank, who's trying his best to gun it for his 6th. At this point, you'd probably just take the 6th and the 7th, right? Get the main and the natural. You want to maybe try to split map it. Dude, there's so many Protoss units sort of sharking around. The Zerg army, by comparison, is not that big. Like, this count in the top right is workers over military. For the Zerg military to be comparable to the Protoss military in terms of size, kind of tells me that I expect AU to just be able to wreck face if he gets the right kind of engagement. Now, you know, if Krankendau can use these Protathalors to maybe hold a spoke and see what kind of cliff advantage he can get, then maybe that can be a little bit different. But he does know that his opponent is in the area. And let's just see how long it takes AU to pull the trigger. He's going into the middle of the map now. We got Krankendau sharking up over here to see if he can do a flank or something. Random Zeth in the middle is going to go ahead and reveal that actually he's been had. He's gone to the middle. Watch out. You don't want that Optecton to start blasting you from the other side of the map. All right, let's see what happens here. Because I'm expecting, again, a grand cataclysmic event for one player or another. A bunch of Zealots run by to cancel the 6th base, going up here for Krankendau. So that is going to, you know, if he doesn't peel off units to defend it, which it doesn't look like he is, he's very deathly afraid of this composition. We got the Tetzoricors for sustain. Ivigrilisk's just a tank. The Kizilisk up there scouting around, not exactly the unit that you want for the job. Heavy mutation of the advanced static defense, try to make it costly there. He hasn't canceled that. It has gone down. Zealots are going to try to get cleaned up by a couple of units, but there's actually more of them than maybe Krankendau was betting on. There's like two rotations of gateway spam out there. And there's the Optecton. There's some Patriarchs mixed in as well for great sustain for the Protoss force. So we're going to see a big, long fight here, I think. Let's see. Now it looks like Aoud is going to force the issue. But this is actually not a bad situation here for the Zerg, because he can kind of collapse on and get a superior flank going. There's a couple of flyers there for the Zerg that have already gone down thanks to the combined arms of the Atriuses. The real story here is the front line, which is starting to fall for Krankendau. He needs to be able to break on through. It's mostly ranged units here for Aoud. His Charlatans are multiplying the damage. A nice storm from that Cantavis. Lakizla is caught in the middle of the lines. That could have been nice if it burrowed, but obviously it also had plenty of detection support. The Archon here for frontlining. Another Optecton coming on down. More Lakizlisks trying to burrow, and the Protathalors are going to be able to bring down one of these Optectons if they focus fire, but it doesn't look like Krankendau is able to do it. He's trying to reinforce with Zoryusalets right now. A bunch of Protathalors additionally just came in, but the Optecton has lost aggro from the Zerg army, and it's going to stay alive, just shelling non-stop shots. And I feel like that's going to be way too much. Well, that was sort of tantric in nature, right? We were built up to the big fight at the end. That's not normally how games in Cosmonarchy go, funnily enough, so it's very interesting to see that in action. But here we go. We are happy to say that Aoud's Protoss apparently is capable of being just as impressive, just as macro-oriented as his Terran. Just watch out if he plays Zerg, because then when he returns from the mountains, he'll be rolling random and running straight through the gauntlet and into the throne room stage eventually, past Battlements, just go straight to the championship, why doesn't he, for our next big tournament. So I hope you guys are going to join us for that, and for now, I say goodbye. GG.